I just want to first say thank you, African International Documentary Film Festival Foundation, for this amazing platform for us to share about impactful storytelling. So I'm Tiger FireRose, a writer, filmmaker, and storyteller. Even though I studied microbiology, I have a certificate to prove it. All I truly know how to do is tell stories in any format, medium, or way. I live, breathe, dream in story. Even my dreams are wild story plots. I enjoy the entire creation process, and I love seeing it through from inception till it gets on the big screen. Um, I've worked on various African Magic, Showmax, Netflix, and Amazon shows in various capacities, either as writer, producer, or consultant. And I currently have a movie on Amazon Prime called To Freedom. And I'm very honored today to be sharing with you about cultural riches, infusing African heritage into storytelling. So, um, in my in my decade of being in this industry, one thing I've realized is words are very powerful, right? Don't let anyone deceive you. Your words are powerful. Your story has the power to change a generation in whatever direction, and it's going to be either positively or negatively. The choice is yours. And how do I know this? I'm an advocate for authentic African storytelling, and it happened because I was influenced by words very early when I was just starting out, right? I came across an ancient African proverb that blew my mind. Like words spoken so long ago by a random African ancestor have managed to shape me thousands of years later. And this is the proverb, right? I don't know, some of us might have heard it, some of us might know it, right? And it says, until the lion learns to speak, every tale will glorify the hunter. So I'm going to say it again. Until the lion learns to speak, every tale will glorify the hunter. And it just made so much sense, right? Because for the longest time, most of what we grew up consuming was like Western culture. And it really just told tales of, sweet romance and action heroes, pew, 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 and like corrupt government officials that get justice because they intentionally painted a system that works, right? And this somehow became like the standard or the culture to portray, even when we as Africans are telling our own stories. And that just shouldn't be, right? We've been so deeply influenced by other cultures that even our stories aren't told from an African perspective and don't hold the level of truth and authenticity that they deserve. Our characters don't give African reactions. They are giving African man with foreign behavior reactions or an African man in his country facing foreign problems, right? So I'm grounding a lot of this storytelling in movies because I'm a filmmaker. That's my major medium of storytelling. So forgive me for the documentaries, documentarians, and the photographers and all of them. Storytelling is storytelling. We are all storytellers. So all stories are human stories, right? And there are only about 5 to 7 basic stories in the world. So basically, you're saying that there's no story that hasn't been told. What's different is your own perspective on the story. And like the amazing speakers before me have all rightly said about stories, authenticity is key, right? So I've watched now, you've brought your trailer, your blockbuster trailer, and you've given me a promise, right? You're an African making a movie. So awesome. As a foreigner, I'm like, oh my God, something different. Let me dive in, right? And then I've come to enjoy your perspective as a foreigner. But what I'm seeing is a knockoff of my reality. I won't be drawn to you. There won't be any connection. I'm just like, what is going on here? This was not the promise. I've been so shocked, right? It's like when you go to a Chinese restaurant and instead of giving you ramen noodles and all this Chinese food that we love, they offer you maybe jollof rice with vegetables in it. You're like, no, 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 no. That's not right, right? That's what we jollof rice is my thing. You can't give me jollof rice and put some vegetables in it and say that all of a sudden it's Chinese rice. It doesn't work that way, right? So the thing is, most people see films, documentaries, whatever it is, they see it as truth, right? And our African romance films still give a Western romance idea, not necessarily how Africans really and truly date and court. Like if I'm going to date a foreigner, maybe an American or Indian, I know what to expect because they are true to their patterns in like all the stories that we've received. But foreigners dating Africans are shocked to their toes because what is portrayed in movies isn't necessarily the ideal African romance. we've done our African men such a great injustice in our movies. They're surprised at how very responsible African men generally are and how they take the role of provider so seriously, even in a relationship, right? Our women are strong, very entrepreneurial, and they are leaders. Generally, in core African culture, women are actually respected and cherished. In the Igbo culture, the Umuada Council of Women are the lead. We have women kings scattered across history, not just we have women kings scattered across history, not just the Woman King movie that we were given, right? That was just done. We've had like female warriors, women lead wars to get their husbands back from the enemy. These are just like general, not even the warriors. We're talking about the women that just come together and are like, you know what? They've taken our men. How about we go and fight this war and bring our men back home, right? So these are strong women that we have in history and in culture. And this, so as African women, we come from a strong lineage of strong women who are audacious, right, and who have done these audacious things. But it doesn't show in our storytelling, right? A lot of times, our women are portrayed as weak, confused, they don't really know what they're doing, because the stories have not been grounded in culture, right? So we have strong women, but these are not the stories we're telling. Even our modern day women, infusing this truth of these strong women will give us an idea into what African women are truly like, right? And if we're being honest, the Western world has run out of stories, right? You don't need a strong storytelling background to know that with all the remakes, retakes, part five, Western world has run out of stories. So you don't need a strong storytelling background to know that with all the remakes, retakes, part five, and unending franchises, whereas we as Africans are an untapped resource, and it seems everyone knows it except us. We're like that child in all the high school movies who is beautiful but has no idea or is too shy to fully become and feels the need to emulate the cool kid or the most popular kid, whereas we're the coolest kid in school, right? The average African knows about New York City, knows about Hollywood, and knows about the White House and a bit of its operations, but we can't say the same for us. The power of media on owning your story is the world begins to believe your way is the way when we all know that there are many ways into the marketplace. Like my Yoruba people say, Onokon Waja. There are many ways into the marketplace, right? So if I had the chance to go around and I ask what sort of stories you want to tell, of course we'll all say, oh my God, I want to tell authentic African stories, right? But before we go into it, a lot of what we think are African stories are what I like to call, or what, most recently we call poverty porn, like Acho rightly said. The child in the village with no water, the village with no access to education, the oppressed people under the thumb of a dictator, the backward traditional practices still going on, where there's more oppression being shown. Like, you get my drift. Do these stories need to be told? Yes, right? But but because these are the only stories now being told, that's what authentic African now means to a lot of people suffering, and it shouldn't be, because that's a very untrue narrative. We are unwittingly helping to fan to flame, because that's what kind of gets you all the applause, gets you the festival tickets, gets you all these many things, right? But how many Africans are actually making waves out there? We have Dr. Olutoye, a world-renowned fetal and neonatal surgeon who successfully operated on an unborn baby. Why don't we have his biopic? Are we waiting for Hollywood to do it? Ben Carson is American. Of course, Hollywood will tell his story multiple times. The Williams sisters are American. It's not Bollywood that is going to tell their story. So why are we waiting for Hollywood to tell our stories for us, right? One of the reasons why you feel a disconnect when you watch the average romantic drama from your country is because the drama being portrayed is not authentic to us, right? The average African isn't really romanced by flowers, even though it's culture that we're trying to appropriate right now. But the average African isn't really romanced by flowers, right? What translate you have to tell us what translates to romance as an African, right? It's not the Western world that tells us what romance is. Well, this is how we romance in our country. Why wants to let them go? That is what we're doing with our media. Like, whatever story you're telling, that's what you're doing. You know, do you know why you are more forgiving of foreign films and you connect more to their stories? It's not necessarily just good storytelling, right? Because what they do is they make you look forward to visiting and immersing yourself in their culture. You may have never met an American, but you have an idea of what an American reaction to a situation would be. Why? Because of all the movies and all the stories that you've consumed. You know why? Do you know one of the reasons why they keep asking us in 2024, about our huts and if we still have water, because that is what we've told them. We have shared the narrative. That is the story we've shared. So before you get upset with the next foreigner asking you about your tree house, take a deep breath and understand that until we tell the right stories, that's what's going to continue happening, right? So you can't tell an African story with Western culture and say it's authentic. We know you just sold us Balderdash. And the Africans know that that's not them. The West knows you're trying to imitate them. You're not saying anything new, you're imitating. It's also not by doing the same thing in an indigenous language. An indigenous language film that is not indigenous in story is just you showing us live subtitles on screen. Storytelling is core to us as Africans. It's how we preserve history. It's how we teach our kids morals. It's how we archive our traditions. In Ile-Ife, archaeologists have used Oriki to discover so many ancient landmarks across the city. Oriki is like an oral history of sorts unique to the Yoruba tribe. So what this has shown is we have a unique way of telling stories already. So we should apply the best storytelling techniques, and elevate our African storytelling. How many of us know the story of the seventh Alaafin of Oyo? So the story goes that she was the first transgender woman king, not queen, woman king in Oyo State, and her name is Alaafin Orunkoto in Nigeria. I'm sure right now a lot of you are intrigued and you're like typing furiously we are Google to confirm, like, oh my God, is that true? Is that true? Like, yeah, this was like centuries ago, many centuries ago. History has it that the men refused to let her be king. They told her the only way they'll let her be king is if she's a man, because a woman cannot be king. And she's like, you know what? Give me 7 days. I'll be right back and I'll be a man. And they were like, okay, sure. Like, they were all mocking her and like thinking everything was great. But then she came back and she was really a man, The first is like, oh, okay, show us your upper part. And then she unveils and like, her boobs are flat, there's nothing there. And then they're like, oh, yeah, anything happen like that. And then just like, we need to see the privates and. And then she actually unveiled and she had become a man. She had the private parts of a man. And they were like just flabberwhelmed and just like, and she was a fierce warrior and one of the few Alafins that have died in combat. So that's just one interesting African story that hasn't been told. Or the story of the first woman king in Ile-Ife, Oniluwo Gbadida, who was so strict and disciplined that after her death, the kingmakers swore never to allow a woman rule as king again. Like, these are stories that are historical, indigenous, and have so many plot twists going on if you delve into like it, if you go into the research of it. Like, how many of us know that the first library or the first university ever recorded was in Africa? Africa's oldest and first university in the world was the Sankore University in Timbuktu, capital of Mali. Where's the movie about? Like, where is it in conversation, right? Our history is an untapped treasure trove. Our current reality is the unique plot twist you need. Once you realize you are telling a human story, but from your own perspective, it changes everything. It liberates you to tell the true African story, one of innovation, perseverance, and audacity. One thing that we have going on for us as Africans, we are audacious. Can we be as audacious in telling our African stories as our culture and stories actually are? We need to learn to celebrate our heroes, not just our shortcomings. We as Africans need to tap into the cultural riches we have and tell our stories our way. And I'm sure you may be wondering how. You can infuse little facts in conversation, banter, instead of having empty page fillers, right? Educate in conversation. The girl from Oyo is upset, right? And says, if Orompoto could do it, why can't I? She's tracing her audacity in her situation to break the norm to her ancestry. Research interesting facts about the tribe you are giving your characters and see it as a huge opportunity to infuse some of it into your story. It can explain why your character is stubborn. It can explain why your villain is wicked. It can explain why the people do the way they do. Do you understand? So you have to ask yourself, what sort of stories are you telling? Why are you telling your story? Is this story for story's sake? Is it for entertainment? Is it for education? You need to know your why, and no matter your why, if you're telling an African story, let it be true to us and our systems. Where do you draw your inspiration from? You don't have to reach too far. There's story all around you. I'm sure things have happened in your family visits or friendships that have made you go, this is wild. This should be a movie. Then write it. The best stories are those grounded in truth. An African telling the story of being stopped by a policeman is completely different from any other culture. We've had African music for centuries now, but the only artists that broke barriers were not the ones that went, oh, I want a gun, I want a shana. The Afrobeat explosion happened because we began to embrace our own style, and it amplified a genre that resonated across the world. That's what our stories should do, amplify us across the world. So, do you amplify the negative or positive? When you're telling us your blockbuster, never been seen before story, what are you really saying? I want to tell an authentic story. But does it give us hope? Or is it one of despair of an Africa that will never move? Because as you're showing us the villages in Africa in every story, there are villages in America. Their communities just as backward. But you don't know because it's not 90% of their media stories. They give it maybe 5%, 10% max attention. There's a sense of balance, but it favors the positive narrative, right? So you're asking, but if I don't tell it, how will people know? What people exactly? The foreigners so they can swoop in and give aid, or is it for you to gather your fellow Africans to fix your home yourself? Because we need to even change the narrative, the mind of needing aid and other people to fix our problems as Africans. When you have a family issue, you don't do a movie and then do a big screen and say, this is my family problem, or this is really what's happening, or and Yara, come and help me. That's not what you do, right? Your movies, you invite the major family stakeholders to sort it out, right? So your movie is the lens by which the world views us. What's the focal point of your story lens? Who will tell the African story if not you? So whether you japa or not, you are African. Nobody else is going to tell your story for you. I don't get excited necessarily when I hear, oh, Hollywood is going to do an African story. The graphics and acting may be great, but I know the story will never be as authentic as when an African is involved in it, right? As far as I'm concerned, unless it's being told by us, there would always be something missing. One thing that Asians and Bollywood have done is infuse their culture into their storytelling. If it's a futuristic, modern day, or historical piece, their culture always shines through, no matter what it is. You see us correcting each other about the other or their own culture, about K-drama, Korean culture. And why this is done, we'll be correcting, no, they don't use this thing, they use chopsticks, they do this, they do that, because we've been effectively educated across all genres. Sometimes we laugh about them, the opening umbrella in the rain. Oh, when the love scene was up, oh, the open umbrella, oh, they run into each other on the bridge, but they become statements that we know and we can converse about. But it's hard to point out something I can call an African statement in movies, even if it's in that there must be a greeting and elder scene, or there's always a cousin or extended family member living in the house, no matter how poor you are. Just nuances true to us. So no matter the genre, African is African. Genre should never be an excuse. And it's in the little things, greetings, food, interactions. One beautiful thing I love about our continent is that communal spirit we have. It's not just a Nigerian or Ghanaian or Kenyan thing. It's an African thing that we share. We are communal in culture that even your work people become family somehow. These are nuances that can be infused into your storytelling. It's not just until you throw a little pidgin here or some local dialect here. Give us nuance. How do we treat elders in the community? Use it as a plot device, holding your heroine from taking a certain action or propelling them there. What is taboo in your community? How can that work into your story to increase the drama or escalate the humor? Give us facts in conversation. Create characters aware of their ancestry. Let it drive them or power them. Let's see how culture colors our characters' thinking. Let's see move them forward. Be an obstacle or be a tool for them to use to conquer their big bad. Research, don't skip it. If you're telling a northern story, immerse us in it. Not just in the cinematography, not just that you shot in the cool spots, but in the dialogue and the character development. So until we begin to tell our own stories and tell them well, we will continue to be subpar and play catch up. So instead of embracing, so we will continue to be subpar and playing catch up. So I believe that one of the things that we should work towards actively, right, is to embrace the opportunity to shift the narrative and introduce a new form of storytelling that's unique to us in our authentic African stories. So once again, I just want to say thank you very much to the African International Documentary Festival Foundation for this opportunity to just share and talk about my passion for authentic African storytelling. Thank you.